The September issue of Exceptional Parent magazine focuses on the elderly and those who care for them. Sign up for free and read it today at www.epmagazine.com.
Hi, baby. I'm back. You see, I only replace her. I replace you so you can play Call of Duty Black Ops 6. Really good.
Where's Dad?
I'm your daddy now.
Oh. Hello, Daddy.
I like that.
Mittens is stuck again.
Mittens, you did this to yourself.
Sir, can you please just unlock the doors?
Just give me 5 stars. Now get the hell out of my car. Tacos, anyone? No! Blessings and gifts for all.
Your Holiness!
Kiss your own baby, lady. Bim, 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 bless. Call of Duty Black Ops is back.
Oscar Mike Radio is a proud podcast partner of Reach Across America Radio, heard every Thursday at 11 a.m. and Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern. They're also big supporters of the nonprofit I Got Your Six, 2 Lives at Once. And with every wreath you sponsor through Oscar Mike Radio, $5 goes back to this great organization dedicated to making a difference in the lives of veterans, law enforcement, firefighters, and first responders battling PTSD. 2 Lives at Once pairs these brave men and women together with dogs rescued from kill shelters. In this way, 2 lives are saved at the same time by saving each other. Donate now. Go to reachacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio to help. That's reachacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio.
Suicide is preventable, and each of us has a role to play in suicide prevention. Suicide is complex. There is no single cause, and it's not always a mental health issue. It could be loss of a job or home, financial or relationship issues, pain, or leaving the military. Suicide does not discriminate. It affects all ages, races, and genders, veterans or not. If you know a veteran who is struggling, connect with them. Let them know help is available. There is quick and easy access to services in times of crisis. Dial 988, then press 1. Talking about it is okay. Don't keep it inside. Don't be ashamed. Don't wait. Reach out. Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Hello and welcome again to Oscar Mike Radio. My name is Travis, Marine Corps veteran and your host. Oscar Mike Radio is part of the Hoobazoo Network. You can find out more on hoobazoo.com. I want to thank my sponsors, Joyce Asack of Asack Real Estate, Army National Guard veteran Mark Holmes of Reapers Detailing and Power Washing, and my supporters, veteran-owned business Travis Arnold's Caisson Shaving Company, and Faye Simon, editor-in-chief of Exceptional Parent Magazine. Thank you very much. So we're going through this year. We're winding down. It's almost like time for Thanksgiving and Christmas preparations, and it's just been a great time here at Oscar Mike Radio. And speaking of great times, I've been trying to get time with my next guest for quite some time. We made it work. He's a Marine Corps veteran, pilot, and does several things in the recovery space. I want to welcome Garrett Biss to Oscar Mike Radio. Garrett, thank you so much.
Travis, thank you. I appreciate this. Yeah, I'm excited. Today's finally the day. We're going to make it happen. We've been talking about it for a little while, but I've been really looking forward to this, and I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, like with all my guests, because every story is different. I mean, you can go, us Marines, every Marine's a rifleman, but every rifleman's story is different. And our story is different. Kind of just give us a high level overview of what your Marine Corps time was like, and then we'll kick this into high gear.
Sounds great. So I think, for many of us that joined out of high school, my Marine Corps career probably started a little bit in high school because I was so gung-ho on joining, and I was wearing the Marine Corps t-shirts everywhere I went, or wearing some fatigues that I picked up at the surplus store. So my mindset was already there. It just took me a little while to get on the yellow footprints and started officially. Some of the things that kind of drew me into the service. So there was this one thing that stood out the most. I noticed whenever I was wearing all these t-shirts or wearing the fatigues, that whenever I saw a gentleman usually that had served in the military prior, whether it was decades before, maybe Vietnam at that time, maybe there's still some World War II veterans I connect with. But I noticed when they started talking about their time in the service, like their eyes would light up and they'd have such vivid memories and just recall, something about that experience. And though I didn't really understand exactly what it was that was so paramount to their, who they had become, I did understand the only way to really appreciate it or fully understand it myself would be to go that journey and join the military and serve. Initially, I thought I was going to be a 4 and out, but then, the Marine Corps got their hands on me and offered me some things and kept sweetening the deal. So I stayed around for a little bit longer and ultimately retired in 2015. I did an early retirement after 16 years, a little more than 16 years, through the terror program for anybody that might know what that is. So I enlisted in 99, was selected for a commissioning program when I was a corporal, and then went off to University of Maryland as part of the ROTC at GW and studied mechanical engineering, and then threw my name in the hat to be to join the pilot pipeline. I didn't know if I'd be qualified to do it. I had a subdural hematoma or brain surgery when I was 10 years old, so I thought for sure they're going to physiologically disqualify me to fly. But I'd always had a passion for it. I'd always remember even in 6th, 7th grade, looking up in the sky and seeing little planes flying overhead and like, man, what's that got to be like? That's so cool. I want to experience it. So I thought, either I'm going to apply for it and be denied, or I won't apply for it and I'll wonder the rest of my life what would have happened if I would have applied. So I applied for it. I raised my hand and the stars aligned, I guess, and I was selected for it. I went off to train to learn to fly the C-130, the KC-130 Juliet in the Marines, and had a beautiful couple of years doing that before my early retirement.
C-130 rolling down the strip.
That's right.
All us Marines got to take a little trip. That's
it. By far the best MOS in the Marine Corps. I'll argue that, any day. To be a captain, I love being a sergeant. I think sergeant's certainly one of the best ranks in the Marine Corps. And then on the officer side, captain's pretty cool because you've been in it long enough that a little bit of, a little bit of your job, have a little bit of responsibility, but you're still junior enough to kind of get away with some shenanigans and have fun. And when they toss you the keys to a C-130 and have you fly it halfway around the world, that's certainly a memorable experience, a foundational part of my, I guess, development as an individual and as a Marine.
It's funny you say that. I talked to a couple officers who said, they didn't realize the huge shift from being a captain to like a major in 03 to 04. And you really start going away from the core, purpose of your job to being more administrative and strategic planning and stuff like that. And
higher level, yes.
It was hard getting used to. And, my MOS in the Marine Corps, Garrett was a Hawk radar operator for the missile system. So we get to practice on C-130s every now and then.
Yeah.
And some of these pilots, man, could do like the real nap of the earth, like navigation. So they'd fly, 200 feet off the deck and,
right.
And then wait till they got out of radar range and you could see them just pop up. So that's
a big reason. Yeah, it's awesome. I call it's a very sporty cargo plane. It's a cargo plane certainly, but it's a very sporty one. And the way that especially the way that we fly it, I mean, it's a way that, you don't no other aviation gets to fly that outside of the way that military gets to operate their aircraft. So it's something else. I had some friends that went off and flew for the airlines when they got out. And I was thinking, after flying 200-300 feet off the ground or through the mountains of the Shenandoah on some night vision goggles, I don't really see it being that exciting flying in a, 30,000 feet.
Just nice and level, no action. Yeah, and just really, people don't appreciate you can land that thing almost anywhere, turn around and take off again. So
That's right.
you do in a, not 20, but enough time in the Marine Corps to really see some stuff. What's it like as an officer getting out? Because I told other officers, I said, we all enlisted think there's like a stretch limousine that pulls up. You get to your,
Yeah, that's what we get. That's right.
Oh,
as soon
really?
as I retired,
There is.
yeah,
And red
Lockheed pulled
carpet.
up with a car, and they were like, "Hey, come work for us." No, I mean, I can certainly appreciate how it's different getting out as an officer. Maybe there's some different doors that are open or different opportunities. But one thing and one challenge, and I think all veterans face this when they get out. For me, I'll speak from my own experience. I
Sure.
was very comfortable in the Marine Corps. I mean, everything that I knew about myself as an individual, as an adult, I had experienced through the lens of military service. So I was very comfortable in that environment. I knew that I could perform. I knew that I could do the job at hand. And I was familiar with, the task load and the mindset of everything that we did. There was a real big fear inside of me that what if this doesn't translate to the civilian world? I know I measure up in the Marine Corps, but what if I can't measure up in the civilian world? And that really, I mean, that was a huge part of the challenge that I faced, the interpersonal challenge that I faced upon transition. I was like, it's a whole different world out there, and I don't know what it looks like. And it's kind of strange sometimes when you think about it, because I was working on Cherry Point, but I lived in town, I shopped in town, I would, go to dinner in town and be surrounded by civilians. But I also understood that there's something that's different about that experience once you're finally out of the military. And it was a huge challenge and a huge struggle. I'm sure we'll dig into it. But took many years to kind of get out of it, and really helped me appreciate and feel for other veterans and their plight as they transition out and try to find their way in a new world. Some ways I feel like it's having an adolescence later on in life, because again, when I was 18, my feet were on the yellow footprint. So everything I knew of myself as my prefrontal cortex is developing, as I'm understanding my identity, it was all as a Marine. When I take that uniform off for the last time, like, I didn't know who I was. And now here I am in my 30s, like, trying to figure out, like, who am I? What value do I have? Where can I thrive in this civilian world? And it can be very dissociating in many ways.
You get out and you start feeling yourself out and understanding who Garrett is. Were there any particular challenges? Because you're now in a completely unrelated field now.
Mm-hmm.
So you got there somehow. What kind of led you to seek out, like, for lack of a better term, health and human services as a career path, Garrett?
Yeah, so I think a little bit the stars aligned, a little bit of finding a purpose and a passion from our pain or from our own struggles. There's some of that, and then just kind of, I don't know, kids kind of falling into it, I guess. It's not, it's something that chose me instead of me choosing it, but I'm so glad for it and I'm grateful for it. And I see how many of the experiences and things that I'd either been exposed to or studied or personally experienced in my life really prepared me for this work and for this passion or the role that I currently fulfill. Looking at that transition though, and this took me a number of years to really get in touch with, but there was some fundamental needs that we all have as humans that we meet through our service in the military. And I didn't really appreciate the profound impact that this can have as we transition out, as we try to find ourselves in a new way. But what became clear to me after a number of years of, for one, going through the darkness on my own and finding a way out, and then really studying it and trying to better understand, like, you get through a horrible rainstorm, you look back and it's like, what the heck was that all about? That's kind of how I felt going through it. And I wanted to have some clarity on it so I could better understand it and also have the confidence that I could continue, that I could prevent that darkness from coming back. What I've become to understand is that, as I mentioned, we have fundamental human needs. And the most important of these that I've identified and have found is, first and foremost, our need for connection. So we are hardwired for connection. As humans, we need connection. We need to be part of a tribe. We need to be part of a group. We need to be accepted. We need to have this sense of belonging. And through our connections, we can also feel a sense of validation that helps lift up our self-esteem, our confidence, and our self-worth. The connection that we have in the military, and we can speak about, in the Marine Corps, that connection, it's unique. I mean, this is a kind of connection that nobody else really gets to experience. We forge these bonds through joint suffering, through long training evolutions, through going through hard times, doing it together, being there to support one another through very challenging times as we're testing our limits and stretching our limits. This kind of connection, I mean, that's not something that a lot of other people get to experience in that form. I mean, think about it. In the Marine Corps especially, we explain connection, or we'll talk about connection as, I will go into battle with you by my side. And we know, and we hear stories all the time about people that will lay down their life and will sacrifice their own well-being for the good of those people that are part of their unit. So that's a level of connection that veterans don't often, if ever, find after they've transitioned from the military. And that being a fundamental human need that we have for this kind of connection, or for connection in general, to lose that and not be prepared for it, that was very disorienting to me. And that left me personally with a tremendous void inside. Now not knowing where my tribe was, or knowing where my place was in a tribe, it also left me kind of isolated and unsure of who I was. And that was a very dark place to be in. And as it got compounded with some other issues, or exacerbated by some other issues, that sense of self-worth, that sense of self-value, that personal identity, it really started to erode. And that created a very painful and challenging situation that I went through. And unfortunately, a lot of veterans experience as they transition out.
You talk about losing connection and being alone, and there's a void there. You think a lot of our fellow veterans' problems, mine too, to a degree, is the fact that we're trying to fill that void and we don't know how?
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. And for me, like when I was experiencing that void inside, I knew that there was something. I knew that something didn't feel right. I knew that there was something inside of me that wasn't right, but I had no idea what it was. But what I did know is if I reached for a certain substance or a behavior, or if I engaged in something to distract myself, that it was easier to deal with that pain and that discomfort. The challenge is when you reach for something, something external to you to numb the pain inside, or to help fill a void temporarily, often either we'll create a relationship with it that we need this thing now because this has become a real survival thing that we require, because it fills that void. It helps us numb that pain. And then it just kind of becomes a very slippery slope. If we're relying on something external to us to live through each moment, but this thing that we're relying on is creating other negative consequences in our life, then that can be an accelerating downward spiral that we go down. So I think first and foremost, connection is a vital thing that we need to recognize how important, how valuable it is in our life, and then really put some intention behind going through that transition with an eye on these changes that we're going to experience, and being intentional about finding that connection and fostering that connection in a new way. I was reading a study recently through the Journal of Lifestyle Medicine that said a lack of proper social connection has the same adverse health effects as smoking 15 cigarettes or drinking 6 alcoholic beverages a day. So it's easy to understand how bad that is for our health. So a lack of social connection having that same adverse effect, now it's easy to understand, for one, how important it is, but two, how much suffering there can be when people lose that and they don't find a way to regain it.
Well, I had to work to regain it, but here's the paradox is I really liked being alone. It took a lot for me to be convinced that not being alone was good for me, because I was very comfortable where I was. So how do we educate ourselves to say, you know what, even though I like being alone, I don't want to go out, I don't want to be around people, I got to just suck it up and get around people because it's a good thing for me. I kind of got voluntold on certain things, and volunteering was actually one of the ways I kind of got around it. But I got very comfortable being alone because I think it was familiar to me. I mean, do you find that in the work you do, where people just tune out and don't want to connect anymore?
Yeah, I do, certainly, and I'll get your feedback on this. Maybe we can unpack this a little bit. My theory behind that is, so beyond the need for connection, we also have a need for authenticity, and they really play together, and they really kind of one supports the other. But authenticity, as I understand it, so if connection is our permission to be part of a tribe, authenticity says that you can show up, be just who you are, express what you think, share how you feel, and ask for what you need without fear that it will cost you that connection. What I experienced when I got out of the military, and a lot of veterans share this with me, is that as I was trying to engage in or be a part of the community that was around me, it didn't feel comfortable. I could very quickly tell that there was something about me that just didn't make others feel comfortable. Maybe it was the level of intensity I had. Maybe it was a very dark and jaded sense of humor that I brought with me. But there was something about it that didn't make me feel that same sense of belonging that I once had. So for me, it was easier to and more comfortable being alone, because it wasn't this agitation of feeling like an outsider, or that constant reminder that I no longer had that sense of belonging. So it's not like I chose isolation or I wanted to be alone. It's that I didn't want to feel that pain or that constant reminder that I'd lost that connection, I'd lost that tribe, and now I was trying to integrate in a place where I really didn't feel welcomed or really didn't feel like I belonged. So I'm curious for you, do you feel like there was some element of that? Do you feel, and maybe we'll take some deep reflection on, but does any of that resonate with you, that there was just a discomfort that you were avoiding by being alone, not necessarily that the alone is what you were seeking?
So a little context, I came out of the Marine Corps. I served in Yuma, rode my motorcycle to Boston and started trying to integrate in the community. So not only was I not from the Boston area, I was just fresh off the boat, so to speak. And to your point, it didn't take me long to figure out that not only am I not like New Englanders, but I'm also not like civilians. And so that's a double whammy for me. And it became, to your point, very clear real quick that I didn't fit in. And I thought of it's the Stranger in a Strange Land book, where you're just not ever going to fit in anywhere. And so I think to that point, yeah, it's like, well, okay, if I'm going to go out and then crack a joke or talk about something, or the famous one for me is you're always on point, Travis. You're always scanning the room for threats, and you're always like heightened, and you just can't chill out. And it's like, well, I can't just turn that off.
Right.
And I'm not sure you want me to, if you understood how bad the world actually is. And so I just found out it was easier, Garrett, to just, oh, you're going to be there. Well, I'm going to, ride my motorcycle, smoke a cigar, or just, hang out by myself tonight. And it just became easy.
Right.
So I think there's a lot, to answer your question, I think there's a lot of validation in what you're seeing and experiencing. Absolutely.
And then the opposite negative consequence of that, as we isolate, as we find more comfort being alone, we are devoid of that connection that we really need. So yes, maybe it's preferable to this awkward situation where we always feel uncomfortable and an outsider and not welcome. Certainly being alone might be preferable to that, but it's also, maybe we're not eating unhealthy food, but we're also not eating healthy food. We're also not nourishing our mental state, our spirit, by fostering those connections that can really help us grow into or become the person, feel that experience that we really want to feel.
Right. It becomes a real self-perpetuating catch-22 kind of deal. So, and this is where I think, understanding your background with addiction recovery, I have to feel that this is how addiction can very easily take root in someone's life. They're filling that void with something to try to deal with them. Yeah.
And especially veterans that we in the Marine Corps, it's no secret, we drink a lot. We love drinking. And for veterans, there's, while you're in the service, let's look at the foundational needs that we have. We have that need for connection, which is met. We have that need for authenticity. We can show up as our crazy, ornery, dark sense of humor self. We can be on edge, and we can have this intensity because it's very normal and that's acceptable and that's who we are. And then also the sense of meaning. So this is another fundamental need that we have. I used to think of meaning more as just, a positive thing that's a nice to have a sense of meaning that you're doing. But what I've come to find out is that meaning actually also provides our capacity to endure suffering. So if your sense of meaning that you have is you were called into the service and you're engaged in this profession where you're providing for the safety and welfare of not just your loved ones, but the entire nation, there's a tremendous sense of meaning that comes with that. And it's because of that strong sense of meaning and what we're doing and what we're a part of that we're able to endure a lot of the difficult, challenging times, whether it's the long training evolutions, whether it's the long deployments. There's such a meaning tied and associated to that. When we get out of the Marine Corps, we're losing that connection. We're losing that authenticity. We're losing that sense of meaning. So maybe you had these behaviors that you once engaged in, but you had a very strong foundation for your mental and emotional well-being. This same behavior, now that you've lost that foundation, or you've cracked or completely destroyed that foundation, this behavior that you're familiar with, this habit that you're used to, can now take a very dark turn and become something much different in your life. And for individuals that are trying to lean into and trying to make those connections, if they're feeling uncomfortable, one way to feel more comfortable in your surroundings is just to numb the pain and get drunk, and then, kind of lean into those social environments. So that's, and that's kind of where I was. And I recognized, like, man, I'm standing atop a very slippery slope. Something feels different inside of me. And I recognize now that there's, alcohol is extremely effective at doing what, at numbing the pain, at helping us disassociate from the challenges or the feelings that we have inside. And that scared me, because I was like, I can really appreciate now how serious of a threat this could be in my life.
The first part of solving a problem is understanding you have a problem. So you understood that there was a problem there. Right. And then reading about you got help for that problem and led you on this path, becoming the certified addiction recovery coach. When you came out of this, why was the focus on, you know what, I'm gonna go through the process of getting certified. I want to explore recovery as not just a way to make money, but as a calling. You know, what was part of your recovery that led you to take these very purposeful steps, Garrett?
Yeah, a big part of it, I think, was just finding a meaning or purpose from some of the suffering that I'd experienced. So back to your point about the first understanding the problem is the first step that we need to take. Through my experience, everything I was exposed to was trying to tell me that alcohol or that substances or behaviors were the problem. And something about that didn't feel right to me. I knew that they were a solution, maybe a bad solution, but they were a solution to a problem. They weren't the problem. And that's something that I still understand and hold to be true today. I recognized in me that no, there was this pain inside of me. I know why I'm reaching for this substance. I know why I'm engaging these behaviors or trying to exhaust myself in work because I'm trying to get out of something. So this idea that I could remove a substance or behavior and that would be the end state. Now I've come to learn a lot more about traditional treatment and multiple pathways to recovery. So I understand that even a traditional approach of, rehab or detox or 12 steps, it's much more in depth than simply just remove this substance. But that was my perception at the time, and that didn't feel right to me. So fortunately, around that time also, I was connected with a mentor who began introducing me to some personal development work and some applied positive psychology principles that helped me deal with the problem. The problem for me was that I was losing my sense of self-worth. I was losing my sense of meaning and purpose. I was losing that positive identity that I had. I was feeling a void inside because I was losing connection, not just connection to other individuals, but also connection to who I was. I didn't know who I was anymore. With now my uniform's hanging up in the closet, like I don't know who this Garrett Biss guy is, out of the military, out of the uniform. So there was a lot of internal things that I was struggling with. And fortunately, through this work that I was doing, I was introduced to some tools and processes that helped me fill that void, to help me deal with the source of the pain so that I didn't have that propensity or that desire to numb it anymore. And through that journey, I began to better understand a lot of the behaviors or a lot of the tendencies in my life. And then a couple of years, after my own journey had begun, I realized as I connected with other individuals who had gone through more of a traditional treatment approach, that there were a lot of things that I picked up that could be very complementary or very valuable to those that were going through and seeking other kinds of treatment. So I understand, I work in the addiction recovery coaching space. So it's really a non-clinical space. And what I understand the difference between clinical and non-clinical. So if you go to treatment, if you're seeing, mental health professionals, if you're going to a rehab or a detox, any of the traditional treatment pathways, I understand treatment in a very broad sense. And this isn't a very comprehensive definition, but in a layperson's understanding, I understand that treatment or that clinical, their role is to help you identify what's wrong with you, whether it's a diagnosis, a defect, some challenge that you're facing, but they help you identify what's wrong with you and then mitigate the effects of whatever that negative symptom is that you're trying to avoid. So if you're something that's, if there's some mental health condition that you have that's leading you towards your addictive substance or behavior, well, then let's help solve that mental health disorder. From a non-clinical perspective, from a coaching perspective, my focus is, I understand, to help individuals identify what's right with them and then leverage that and expand that so that they can ultimately, we want to help people get to the same place. We want people to experience a better version of their life or get from where they are to where they want to get to. It's just kind of two different, I think, approaches to that same solution. And in that regard, they can be extremely complementary. So if anybody has gone through or is going through a traditional treatment or they're seeking mental health care, I seek mental health care, have in the past and do whenever I need to, there can be a benefit to kind of wrapping around or addressing the challenges that you're facing, that darkness that you're facing from a more holistic perspective. And I think there's a lot that I learned from the positive psychology and the coaching world that can be very valuable to individuals. And that's what kind of sparked my interest and my curiosity about it. And then after more training and more schooling, I really feel what I love most is that if you, from the perspective of a coach, if you're helping somebody get to a better place in their life, then that doesn't end at zero. We're not trying to get somebody back to out of the gutter per se. My focus is not helping somebody get out of the gutter from the depths of their problems, but help them once they've gotten there, once they've started that progress, to get as high or to get as far in their life as they want by leveraging whatever they learn, by leveraging the new strength, the new skills, the new determination that they learned through their struggles to apply that to continue the journey.
So you're very upfront, like it's not going to be easy. There are going to be challenges, but you can take these challenges and what you learn from those and use it to have success in other areas of your life.
And fortunately, we have challenges because I think that's how we grow. I mean, that's how we strengthen. You don't go to the gym and just, you know, sit there and look at your phone and expect your quads to grow and your chest to your bench press to increase. You know, we put ourselves through challenges, and through the context of life, it's those challenges that help us develop new skills, develop new capacities, develop new awarenesses. So instead of just trying to navigate those challenges and survive life, let's lean into those challenges and gain from it what we can so that we can grow into that person that we want to be.
Before we go on to the next part, I want to ask you something I asked somebody else recently. I hear this phrase that addiction is a disease talked about a lot. And I've gotten into disagreements with people, and I could be completely wrong here, but I'm like, how is it a disease? It's not like, and I only say this because I have experience with people I know who've gone through addiction. At one time they were not, and they got addicted by, you know, doing activities that got them addicted. And I don't know if it's just semantics or is there a real physiological reason why this is called disease. And my problem with it is if you say it's disease, then it kind of removes the whole accountability side of it out of the equation. Whereas if you the people I've met who have dealt with their addiction, regardless of what spectrum it's on, if they say, you know what, I own this, and you know, to use the NA mantra, just for today, if I can get through today, then I've succeeded. And so I'm kind of curious what you think about that, because it's something that nags at me.
Yeah, certainly. So great question. And there's a lot of different discussion on this. I'll share my own kind of experience and my own viewpoints. So, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind when I hear the word disease is, I mean, I think of it not maybe from the clinical definition of disease, but I think of, let's break the word apart, dis-ease. So to me, yes, there certainly is some dis-ease and some, like I talked about myself, I had this darkness inside of me. I had this void inside of me. There was something inside of me that wasn't at ease. So from that regard, you know, it's not a clinical sense, but from that regard, I certainly agree that there's something that's being masked or dealt with in an unhealthy way, but there was a problem to begin with. And then somebody has found some solution for it that is creating more negative consequences in their life. But let's step back a little bit. So my understanding of addiction, the best definition that I've ever read is one by Dr. Gabor Mate. He defines addiction as addiction manifest in any behavior that a person craves, finds temporary relief or pleasure in, has a negative consequence because of, and yet has difficulty giving it up. So that's a lot of words, but I love how comprehensive that definition is. For one, it helps me understand that, you know, addiction is not just a arbitrarily short list of substances or behaviors. Addiction can be anything. I mean, there's socially acceptable addictions like workaholism, or people that are, you know, fanatics at the gym, not, you know, beyond the need for good health, but it becoming more of an escape. There's a lot of things that people can engage in. You know, it's more socially acceptable to be a Netflix binger every night than it is to, you know, smoke cigarettes or do any hard drugs. But I understand from this definition, it's all really related in its nature. The nature is we're seeking something external to our body to create or change some kind of internal feeling that we have. So in that regard, I can see, we'll get back to the disease question, but in that regard, I understand addiction as a normal human behavior. Somebody is reaching for or seeking something external to their body, which we all do at times, to change or synthesize something inside. And then it compounds. It's a self-compounding issue, because the more that you do that, the more that you rely on this thing that's external to you, then the less capacity you have to deal with whatever it was that you were facing to begin with. So if there's some things in your life that aren't in alignment, it's creating a very difficult situation for you. If you find your relief in something that, like I said, alcohol is extremely effective at numbing some pain and helping us escape some things. If you find, you know, your relief in that, if you reach for it too long, then your ability to deal with some of those life challenges or make decisions to move you into a better position, that also atrophies. So making it more challenging to deal with or to live without it. And then back to the disease perspective of it. Now, I don't have a PhD in this. I'm not a licensed clinician, but I do know that when somebody engages in a substance of abuse for a period of time, it does change their brain function and their brain chemistry. The parts of our brain that we rely on to help us make those positive decisions, understand and see consequences, avoid temptation, to have this inhibition control, those parts of the brain really do begin to atrophy. So it does get to a place where the capacity to say no to something, or the capacity to resist a craving or a temptation, that does get inhibited. And it gets to a place where sometimes, individuals, it becomes, for people that have struggled with opioids for a period of time, it really becomes a place where they don't have the mental capacity to make a different decision or change that decision. And it becomes as real a need for them in that moment, or in the periods of their pain or their darkness. It becomes a very real need, to the point that they understand it as, or they relate to it as, the same that you and I do for taking our next breath. So that thought of like, how long can I hold my breath? It's the same pressure or temptation. And this is something, I challenge a lot of people to experiment with. If you don't understand what it's like to try to constantly avoid a temptation, well, then leave your cell phone right next to you, leave a social media app open, and don't touch it. Don't look at it. Don't touch it. And see, every time you think about picking up that phone, or engaging in, whether it's picking up the social media or whatever that is, every time you think about it, that's like, that craving or that draw to something. Now, thank goodness for a lot of us, or at different periods in our life, thank goodness, one, the pain that we were that we were experiencing wasn't so severe that we needed something so intense to cope with or to deal with that pain. And two, thank goodness for the things that I reach for. Maybe I am having a difficult day, and I do doom scroll for a little while because I'm trying to get out of my mind. I'm trying to get those little dopamine hits to numb the uncomfortable situation inside. Thank goodness for me, that doesn't have the same chemical addictive hooks as another substance or behavior.
Following up on that, you're also part of an outreach called Valiant Path, which I thought was very interesting. It encompasses a couple different things, but it's always interesting to me when you can have your main career focus, but it's also you continue this aspect of service. And I was hoping you kind of unpack where that came from and what are you doing with it.
Yeah, certainly. So just to explain, so Valiant Path, that's actually a coaching program and veteran community that I've developed that brings a lot of the insights, a lot of the tools, a lot of the processes that I was introduced to that are really effective in that personal development space and that coaching and mentoring space. So it's the best of what I found over the last 10 years, kind of put together in a program for veterans, or really any individual, but it's specifically geared towards veterans who have struggled with the substance or behavior in the past. They know that something's not right. They're not showing up as that version of themselves they want to be. So it's a program and a community to really help them get back to that. Some of the outreach that I do now is more focused around this topic of unspoken trauma. So this trauma that all veterans face. And this was really kicked off with my TEDx talk earlier this year, where I talk about that transitional trauma, or the trauma of transition. So I understand, as we have these basic fundamental human needs for connection, for authenticity, for meaning, the loss of those fundamental needs the minute you're handed that DD-214, not being prepared for that in and of itself can be a traumatic experience, regardless of what somebody experienced while they were in the military, on the battlefield, in a training environment, or anything that they experienced there or in their life before the military. Regardless of that transition from military service itself can be traumatic. And that's what a lot of the outreach and speaking I'm doing now is just trying to, for one, I want veterans to be able to put a face and a name to some of that internal struggle. For me, the biggest challenge as I was facing that and living through that was I knew there was something wrong, something felt wrong inside, something felt missing, but I had no idea what it was. And not knowing what it was, I think, was even scarier, because it alleviated or prevented me from experiencing hope that things could get better. So that's what I want to do, is just kind of share that message and get that out there so veterans better understand it, to provide that hope to veterans. And then any family members or loved ones or people that work with veterans can better understand that struggle, so they can better support or serve those veterans that they're working with.
It still raises the question, when the veteran finally figures out that there's something off, not right, or can improve, what happens when they onboard with you, or they reach out to you and say, hey, you know what, Garrett, I've looked at myself, I've looked at what you offer, and I think this is for me because of this. How do you bring them into what you're trying to do to get them to, rebuild their lives?
Certainly. So a couple of things we do. One, as a group, is just helping them regain a sense of community or connection with other veterans, regardless of where we are. We all either go back to our hometowns, or we move, and we sever all those connections with people on active duty. I remember when I got out, I thought the only veteran community were the people that were sitting around drinking beer at the VFW, and I didn't really want to have anything to do with that at that time. What I've come to understand, there's a lot of other veterans out there that also want to be connected with, also feel more comfortable with when there are those connections with other veterans. So that's certainly something that I encourage and help foster through the Valiant Path community. Because when, one of the biggest challenges that we have is this mental health in general, the biggest barrier I see to people that prevents them from getting the help that they need or keeps them in a bad situation longer than they should be is stigma. There's all this stigma about talking about addiction issues, mental health issues, all of the stigma about, there's veterans that, there's veterans that didn't experience something in the service that was necessarily traumatic that they understand. So they're afraid to even talk about the PTS symptoms or the PTSD symptoms that they're having because they don't feel that they necessarily deserve to have those symptoms or that suffering. So they're afraid of how they'll be seen if they start to share or express the things that they've been through or how they're feeling. So stigma is a huge thing. And just by fostering that community, providing a safe place where people can share their story is a very powerful way, or really maybe the only way that we'll start to overcome reduce the effects of the stigma and help people share, because a lot of healing can come just from sharing our story. That's one of the biggest benefits of the 12-step, the support groups, is having a safe place where somebody can go share some of their darkest secrets and not feel like they're being ostracized or judged for what they're sharing. They can feel seen and understood as a human. So that's a beautiful element. And then the work I do individually with clients one-on-one is helping them back to that foundational need for connection. What I understand is that before we can connect with and foster strong, nurturing connections with others, we need to connect with or reconnect with ourselves. Let's reconnect with the things that we have that are valuable, the strengths that we have, the wins and successes that we've had in our life. Because if we don't have the sense of self-worth or the sense of confidence or value, then many times we don't feel that we're deserving of that nurturing connection that we have with others. And as best I understand, the energy that we put out is typically the energy that we get back from others. So if we go out into a situation or an environment and we don't feel worthy or we don't feel good about ourselves, then we're not going to be matched with that kind of nurturing connection and acceptance and validation that we need.
You're doing all this, and your life took several turns after the Marine Corps, and now you're in the space of speaking about, the trauma transition, doing, recovery coaching, doing coaching for veterans. I'm curious if you tell us, what's it like? Let's start with the glass half empty first. What's it like when you're watching a veteran, or as much as you can tell me, a person going through your program and it's still a struggle for them to face what you're seeing very clearly?
So that's a big challenge for all of us, seeing the situation that we're in. They say if you're in the bottle, you can't see the label, or if you're in the picture, you can't see the whole frame. It can be really challenging. So one thing I do is just, for me personally, I try to see the human that's having the struggle. One effective and valuable way to do that, a lot of the things that start to plant the seeds or start to tear at our fabric of self-worth and value, they can happen in childhood. Many times they do happen in childhood. So for me, one thing that I do is I try to see the child in the person that I'm talking to, because when we can see the child and we think about a child, a lot of times that helps us have a lot greater compassion for and understanding. And really, I think we're all adults. We're all children inside of us trying to, show up and live in this world as best we can as adults. So that's one thing that I do. And then just providing permission for individuals to share their story. And, if they're rejecting themselves because of things that they've experienced or things that they've done or things that they dislike about themselves, if they're rejecting themselves, and one of the most powerful things that we can do is not allow them to feel rejected by us. Just seeing them as a human being that's having a human experience. We're all trying to do the best that we can at any time with whatever tools and resources and awareness or energy that we have. That's true for all of us. So the best that we can recognize that, I think it can really kind of come across in the interactions that we're having. And then just loving them through it. I mean, I had a mentor one time that reminded me, my job as a recovery coach or as a coach in general is to love somebody until they're able to love themselves.
So you have that part of your coaching. I got to ask then, what's it like when you see the person who you identify with because you've been through all the same struggles and challenges they have, look at your program, jump right in and work hard to get to that place in life. What's that like, seeing them come out on the other side?
Oh man, it's always surreal to see it,
Yeah.
especially when I check in with people, months, years later, and hear about how they're doing. Like, I'm so grateful for it. And it's just very surreal, and it's a beautiful experience. And For me, it's beautiful because it reminds me that I was able to take some darkness in my life and make some light come out of that and use that to kind of help move forward. But I also know and understand that anybody else that is experiencing a refined or a better version of their life, that doesn't just impact them. And that's why I do a lot of that's one thing that led me into this work in the recovery world. Because, addiction is not something that just harms the individual. It harms their family, it harms their community, harms their workplace. The same is true for somebody who finds a recovery and really grows into or becomes that version of themselves that they want to be. That's not something that just affects that individual. It affects their family. It affects their community. It affects many things at large.
So there is the ripple effect from what they do.
Absolutely.
You're in the process of building this business up. I watched a TEDx talk, and I'll have a link to that in Oscar Mike Radio show, folks, ladies and gentlemen. I have to wonder, though, what's next for you? Is it just to keep building your business, keep practicing your craft, or do you have other objectives or initiatives in line for 2025, Garrett?
So what I'm looking at now, so I understand as a population, there's about 19 million veterans in America. As a population, veterans are more than 200% more likely to suffer with mental health challenges or struggle with addiction. We see more, the numbers change, but unfortunately, I think they're going up, the number of veterans that take their own lives or die from some avoidable death. There's a lot of veterans that are struggling from that, in the depths of that darkness and really in the clinically diagnosable challenges that they're facing. But there's many millions more veterans that maybe they're not in that dark of a place. Maybe they found a new career and they're leaning into it. But there's millions of veterans that don't feel like they're showing up as the best version of themselves. So the next evolution, what I'm working on now is putting together some programming to take into companies that employ veterans, so I can work with those veterans and help them kind of refine and be that person that they want to be. Remember who they are and lean into and be that person that they want to be. Again, because not only does that help the veteran, but then that in turn can help the company, which can help the community, which can help, our country at large. So I'm excited to take everything that I've learned and kind of remold it or repackage it so that I can help a wider audience of veterans.
It goes back to what we learn in boot camp, know yourself and seek self-improvement. I mean, that's a very simplistic way to say that, but that's essentially what you're guiding veterans through, to remember that aspect of themselves.
Yes. And it can just be a reminder. I mean, we know that while we're in the service, we're always evolving. We're always trying to grow and learn new things. But I think after you go through that trauma of military transition, it can be very jarring and it can really disconnect us from that. And for a lot of veterans, they find themselves in this survival place. They're just trying to show up every day and get done what they need to get done. But they're not really loving it. They're not really putting their best into it, and they're not really enjoying it as much as they can. For any service member that raised their hand and stepped forward to serve our country, I think that, for one, they're definitely valuable and they're lovable just as they are, and they should be congratulated. But they also are deserving of the happiness and fulfillment that they can get from living that best version of their life.
For sure, for sure. I want to circle back to an addiction question real quick. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts just passed the HEROES Act. And the HEROES Act, part of it is the stipulation that marijuana treatment for PTSD must be studied by hospitals or a consortium of medical professionals, counselors, doctors, psychiatrists, the whole 9 yards, right? And come back with a position statement based on the research they did about the efficacy of marijuana for PTSD treatment. And some people were like, well, it's just, a lot of chest thumping and spending money on stuff we know already. But to me, it's kind of significant because it's the first time I've seen where a state government has said, hey, it's not this we're going to allow it or not. We're actually going to put some money behind it. But then there's the other side of the coin that says we shouldn't be using marijuana for PTSD treatment at all because of addiction problems and what we don't know about it. And I'm just curious what you think, because I've watched some veterans suffer from physiological problems and wounds from service, and problems from that came up later because they served. And living with pain is not fun. So I'm torn on this one, and I just want to see what you thought, because I'm looking for a right or wrong answer. It's not a gotcha, but I'm like, it's interesting because the addiction question is asked a lot of times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a great question. Well, for one, I'm grateful that they are putting some money and some intention behind this to really figure out, make an informed decision on which direction they're going to go. as far as it comes back to veterans and marijuana use, so, and this is stepping back a little bit, I don't think that there's any substance that's good or bad. I think it's a person's relationship with that substance that becomes challenging or becomes bad. I mean, we can't say that opioids are bad because somebody abuses them or becomes addicted to them, yet use them every day in our hospitals, use them every day for treatment or for surgeries. We can't say that alcohol is good or bad if we, there's different contexts that it's used. If alcohol is bad because some people become addicted to it, then how do we still use it as a sacrament in a church? Like, can it not have any kind of value, or can there? So again, it comes back to, it's not the substance, but it's somebody's relationship to it. And there's a lot of veterans out there that are struggling, and they're reaching for something that, again, it's creating a negative consequence, and maybe creating a much greater negative consequence in their life that is exacerbating their problem and making every day they're one shovel deeper in the hole, and every day it's getting harder and harder to get out of that. So for those individuals, if there can be some benefit to using a different substance, and I don't demonize, or I don't have anything wrong with, any substance that's out there, because the reality is, for a lot of individuals that are struggling with an addiction, let's be honest, they go to a treatment center and they're coming out with a handful of other prescriptions to help deal with some of those symptoms that they're still dealing with. I talk to veterans every day that have 9, 10, a dozen different prescriptions that they've been given from the VA to all help kind of deal with some kind of problem that they're facing. So for me personally, if somebody is, if they're doing it, you said marijuana assisted therapy, so that's a big component of it. If it's part of a therapeutic process to help an individual grow and get to a better place, then I certainly see the efficacy in that. And I'd be behind, if the research supports it and they can show safe and effective ways to utilize it, then I'd be happier with somebody that is using something else to deal with that void inside or that pain inside, that's not creating the negative consequences. They're not getting DWIs anymore. If they're not, I've drunk a lot of alcohol in my days, and there's a lot of things that I've done on alcohol that I wouldn't have done without it. A lot of aggression that comes up, a lot of the inhibition control, a lot of whether it's spending more money than I should or taking more risks than I should. Compare that to some of the consequences of somebody using marijuana. It doesn't seem to, it doesn't really seem to equate to me. There's not a lot of people that are getting in bar fights because they smoked a blunt. From what I've seen. Maybe you've seen something different. So I certainly see and can appreciate that perspective of it. But also, I think that the worst thing to do is just take one substance and replace it with another one. What I encourage and what I really want for individuals is to get to the place in their life that they want to be, not to rely on something external, not saying that they shouldn't use something external, whether that's, marijuana, or whether that's their Netflix binge, or whether that's eating, too much chocolate cake, or going back for that milkshake like I like to do. If they're using something external to their body to create an internal response, then it comes back to the consequences that they're facing as a result of it. I've known some people that have really struggled with alcoholism for a period of time, and they are using marijuana. Maybe, some are using it illegally, but using marijuana as part of their growth process to get to a better place. This is very similar in my eyes to this whole process of this whole endeavor behind MAT, or medically assisted treatment, where they take one substance to replace one, but it creates a better, more stable life situation for somebody where they can continue to work on some of those traumas that they have. And then at the end of the day, I want somebody to get to the place that they want to be in their life. And if somebody says, hey, I'm smoking weed every day, and I'm okay with that because I'm not doing the crazy stuff that I was doing on alcohol, or I'm not using some other drugs with worse consequences, then if that's where they want to be in their life, then I'll support it. If they are not where they want to be in their life, and they think they have, they have a problematic relationship with something, or having a hard time putting it down, well, there's a beautiful invitation to continue to do some of the work to get to a better place in your life. But I don't have anything for or against any substances. In fact, one of the things that I am really excited about is the potential for some psychedelic assisted treatments and psychedelic assisted therapies that are being investigated, and especially for veterans use and dealing with PTSD. Some of the results that I've seen from that, and some of the promising outcomes of that, it could be revolutionary for the way that we help deal with mental health challenges.
As you grow in your outreach and your business, connection is important. So more than just asking the simple question of how can people connect with you, I'm very interested is what kind of people should connect with you. Is it just veterans only, or are civilians able to take advantage of your perspective and experience, Garrett?
If somebody feels called to it, I'll certainly be willing to work with. So until 2 years ago, I was working with civilians. And then about 2 years ago, I decided, I need to refine this and focus just on the veterans, because I certainly understand that plight the most and feel most connected and feel the greatest sense of return when I'm helping other veterans. But for anybody that has a situation or an issue and they want to reach out, I'm certainly happy, whether that's just having a chat with them to help them better understand something, or whether that's providing with some tools or resources to get to a better place. The individuals that, if you're wondering if you should be somebody to reach out, are you experiencing the life that you want to experience? Or have you been through some treatments and maybe dealt with some of the issues that you have, but you don't feel like it's gotten you to where you want to get to? If you're not showing up, if you're not loving the version of yourself that you are, not showing up how you want to show up, then I've got a lot of tools, a lot of processes, a lot of resources that I can share with you to help you progress in that journey and move further down the road, or continue to evolve into that person that you want to be.
I just like the aspect that you served in the Marine Corps, you had your pathway through addiction, and now it's not just some person with a lab coat on or a medical coat on talking with you, taking notes. Like, you've actually had to, walk your talk, and you've done it personally. So how can people connect with you and what you do, and, either just to support what you're doing or become a client?
Yes, a great question. So Garrett Biss, a pretty rare name. I don't think there's any other Garrett Bisses out there on social media. I haven't found any. So if anybody wants to find me, I'll show you all the links to all my social medias. And if anybody wants to reach out that way, that's great. If somebody's a little curious about some of the kind of the work or the resources that I have, I think I told you this before, but I've created a free resource and I want to share that with your listeners, and anybody that's interested, you can go to thewarriorreset.com. What I've done is I've found 4 of the most powerful, efficacious, and quick acting processes or daily practices that I've come across, and put it together in a little program. It takes no more than 15 minutes a day if you do all 4 of them, but there's an invitation there for you just to try it out. Give it 10 days, go through some of the practices. It'll help you reconnect with yourself. It will help you experience a little bit of a spiritual, a mental health, and emotional reset. So if you feel like there's something missing, or you just need a little bit of refinement, check that out. It's extremely valuable and helpful resource. And if you want to, I know you include the link to the TEDx talk. There's a website, unspokentrauma.vet. It's a place where you can view the TEDx talk, but it's also a place where I invite you, if you have some friends, some colleagues, or other people that you'd like to share it with, then let's host a virtual watch party. And what I'll do is I'll jump in a Zoom room. We can all get together. We'll watch the 10-minute talk. And then there's an opportunity to share or ask questions, because a lot of healing, I think, can come from just providing people permission to kind of share their own story or share their own new awarenesses as they've watched that. So for anybody that's interested, you can go and check that out.
Hey, Garrett, I want to have all those links in the Oscar Mike Radio show post, because I want people to watch and listen to this and then go right to what you're offering. I think, like I was telling people earlier, Garrett, the theme for this year in Oscar Mike Radio is relationships. And I think for a person like yourself, you've got to build that relationship with your client. But I think the main thing that I got, at least from what I meet the little terminal lance corporal listening to the captain, is this real thing where you've got to listen to yourself first, and then understand who you are, understand needs to be fixed, and then you can go out and either live the life you want, and that's fine, or live the life you want and recapture that service focus that a lot of us military veterans have. So I thought that was very interesting.
Absolutely.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, again, it took a little while, but good things come to those who wait. I'm a hawker, so I'm kind of an ambush predator. And in that respect, it's been nice getting to talk with you, Garrett, about what you do. I feel we've just scratched the surface. So here's an invitation to come back on in the future when things expand, and certainly enjoy talking with you. And I wish you all the best in what you've got going on for 2025.
I really enjoyed it. I appreciate you, Travis. And if you ever want to have me come back on and dive into some more topics or talk about some controversial things, I'm game. I'm all for it.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Ladies and gentlemen, again, Garrett Biss, U.S. Marine Corps, and now in addiction recovery and coaching. Again, I'll have the links in the Oscar Mike Radio show post. Thank you so much. And as we say in Oscar Mike Radio, we are mission in flight.
Remember, on it teaches our mission. We care about it, and we do it every day. But I think there are things that just hit you and give you a reason to go on. The theme for our 2024 for Reach Across America is Live with Purpose. It just seemed to fit in with the vows of the REIT, the 10 attributes that we feel represent our United States military. I thought, what a great opportunity to put those two things together and show our kids through how we act some of the things that can make their lives better, their communities better, and by doing that, the country better. For me, live with purpose, I think, it's a mindset. Set some guidelines and then go out and purposefully make life different, make a change. It's an opportunity to set an example.
Thank you for listening and watching Oscar Mike Radio, where our active duty service members and veterans are in action and the mission is in flight. Oscar Mike Radio is an oversized load Co-Sinister One production. If you are a veteran or know a veteran who needs help, please dial 988 and press 1 for the Veterans Crisis Line.